From our studios around the world, this is the Taste of Place podcast. Every month we bring you stories from chefs and makers of unique or artisanal food and beverage products to inspire you on your culinary travel journeys. I'm your host, Eric Wolf. Thanks for listening. Welcome to episode 72 of the Taste of Place podcast. Today we will be speaking with Audrey Kelly. Audrey is the co-owner and head pizza maker at Audrey Jane's Pizza Garage in Boulder, Colorado, in the USA, which she runs with her brother Peter. After studying pizza making under Tony Gimignani, she opened her restaurant and achieved quick success, with the restaurant having been featured on the Food Network, the Travel Channel, and Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Audrey won first place in the Pizza Intelia competition in Naples, Italy, and has been featured in the New York Times and NPR. As a mother of twin boys, she balances family life with expanding her business, including plans for a second location. Audrey also grew up in a family of bakers, so she knows a thing or two about making dough. Here's our conversation with Audrey. Audrey, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I happen to notice that you are the second pizza maker that we've had on in a row, and our last guest was Joe Carlucci in Alabama. Do you know Joe?
I do, yeah. Me and Joe go way back. We actually are on the World Pizza Champions together, which is a international pizza team here in the U.S. Well, in the U.S.
Okay, so I got to ask, who makes a better pizza?
I would like to say I do, but I also think it's very subjective. You know, to me, pizza, it's something that is in your memory.
I like that because I think that when we talk about culinary tourism, we talk about creating a memory and not a meal. Why the memory is so important to you?
I really think everyone's idea of their favorite pizza stems back to their first bite of pizza or their first childhood memory of pizza. So what I like to think as my favorite pizza isn't going to be yours. I make at my store what I love, right? So the kind of pizza I create and I sell is my favorite kind of pizza. What Joe makes and creates is his favorite kind.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that we both make really good pizza.
I'm sure you both do, yeah. But I think also it's not just the pizza. I think it's the experience. So it could be whether the guest gets to meet you, say, in your pizza shop, or maybe there's something exciting that happens at that time, or maybe they had a birthday or something during that pizza event, and maybe that helped to create the memories for them. And there's so many factors that go into creating that perfect memory, I think, when it comes to food and beverages these days.
Absolutely.
So I noticed that you were studying journalism before. And what was that pivotal moment in Italy that made you decide to switch careers from journalism to pizza making?
I would say it was a couple. I grew up in a food family, so food was always a huge part of my life. And I always wanted to kind of tie the two together. So I wanted to do something with food journalism. Maybe not so much as like reviewing restaurants and that kind of thing, but I loved the idea of like more investigative food journalism, which I clearly didn't pursue. I ended up opening my own pizzeria. But I think the pivotal moment was just seeing how closely like the land and everything in Italy is tied to the food and how it's represented on pizza itself. So in the US, pizza has evolved a lot even since I got into it. But in Italy, you could do anything with pizza, you know, and you saw what the ingredients that were going on the pizza right next to the pizzeria. And for me, it was very eye-opening. And I also loved that you could create anything on a pizza. It's a blank canvas. You know, if you make really good dough and you have really high quality ingredients, it's its own fully composed plate.
So did anything that you learn in journalism find its way into the pizzeria, or was that just a completely different chapter of your life that you shut down?
No, I still write for a pizza magazine almost monthly. And I like to think that I bring the journalism into the pizzeria in different ways.
Nice.
I've definitely dropped a lot of it. It's not exactly how I envisioned my life going, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, but you're still writing. That's really cool. You've been able to combine your two passions. I love that. So you've achieved a lot. You have won international pizza competitions, and you've been on popular TV shows. How do you balance the desire for recognition and growth while maintaining your authenticity and the intimate atmosphere of a local family-owned business?
You know, I kind of found that one followed the other. Like the more work I put into it, the more recognition we got. And, you know, a big part of obviously going to compete is putting yourself out there. but it's kind of a full circle, like if you go do competitions, you get the publicity, it all brings things back into your pizzeria. It attracts people. Like the TV shows that were filmed at our restaurant, they contacted us, and it's great for business. I wouldn't say that I'm the best at public speaking and that I, go towards the spotlight, but there's things you do to be successful. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand, especially in this day and age where everything and everyone is so visible online.
So is Audrey Jane's Pizza Garage now a destination?
In some ways, we were on Triple D 3 times now, and we have people from all over the nation coming in because they love that show so much, and they seek us out specifically because they saw us.
For those listening in other countries, that is diners, drive. What is it? Drive-ins, diners,
drive-ins, and dives. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that is a
I guess
fun
it's probably
TV show.
not as popular everywhere in the world.
No, a lot of people outside the U.S. don't know it, but I think some people have heard of it, and it's a fun show. It kind of brings places like yours out into the open, and they're great at scouting out those unique places like Audrey Jane. So I'm pleased that you were able to get featured on that.
Yeah, thank you. We were excited as well. I don't think we even realized like how much extra business it would bring in, or how much more recognizable we would be just from being on the show.
Nice. So you have a family history with Moe's Broadway Bagel, plus your own experience in pizza making. I'm just wondering, how do you see the role of tradition versus innovation in your business?
To me, I feel like it's important to know both. You have to know the basics in order to make a really good product and kind of understand the process. But I think you have to always keep moving forward. The most successful places are the ones that never stop trying to get better and trying to improve and trying to learn. I don't think that you have to, create something totally out of the box. I think you have to put forth your best self and your best product. And I mean, like I said, I think to keep learning, knowing your food and knowing like why something is so good and how to make it so good is the fundamentals of your product.
So do you have a classic dish on your menu that everybody loves, and then something that is innovative that also people love?
I would say that we carry most of the basics. So we do a cheese pizza, we do a pepperoni, we finally do a margarita. I hesitated for quite a while because we're not a Neapolitan place. We don't do wood burning. I just don't think it translates quite as well on like a New York style pizza. And we do Sicilian style as well. So we do have all the classics, but I feel like a lot of our ingredients aren't quite as traditional.
So you're delivering great pizzas, but you're not necessarily using traditional ingredients.
Exactly. Yeah. Like if you want to come to us and get a traditional pizza, absolutely. Like we can make that happen. But we also, we make we do a house made like calabrese honey. We pickle our own vegetables. I know that's not so out of the box, but we make everything in house. And I think like a lot of our pizzas, one of our most popular is called a Green Mountain, and we pile on raw spinach and then cook it down. And, I don't think you necessarily find that in like an old school pizzeria.
Sure. Oh, that sounds good. So I got to ask, Italian wheat or American wheat?
We use American wheat.
Do you? Okay.
We do, yeah.
What's your decision on that? Why? How did you end up deciding to stick with American wheat rather than using the Italian wheat?
I think it's kind of a loaded question because I do love Italian wheat and I love Italian flour companies. But I feel like one of the biggest lessons I learned while I was in Italy was using local. Like you're not only supporting the local farmers, but you're not transporting it. And I think America grows some of the best wheat in the world, honestly. So I think to me, it started as something really important just to, Colorado doesn't grow a ton of wheat, but we get a lot of wheat from Utah, from Washington. 5% of our flour is actually milled. We used to mill it in-house with a Colorado Turkey Red, and now we get it from a local mill that mills it for us.
While you're using American wheat, you're still trying to buy local or regional products as much as possible.
We try to, yeah. I do think there's certain things that only Italy, can produce. Like, I think the best stracciatella we found is from Italy. The best bufala mozzarella is from Italy. There's certain things that you can only get in Italy that for some reason in America we can't quite figure it out.
Well,
I
maybe
still
the
think
Americans will get there
prosciutto.
eventually.
Yeah, and I don't, I think it's just the place. Like there's some things in America that you can't produce in Italy.
It's funny because a lot of people, well, there's this big kind of war going on between authentic and immigrant influenced foods, and Italian is such a great example because we have things like spaghetti and meatballs and chicken parmigiana in the United States, and I think both dishes are fantastic. But if you put an Italian person in front of them, they would say, "What is this?" And they'd make fun of it and
That's so
laugh
true.
and tell you this isn't authentic and all. And I get it, but these American dishes are not trying to be Italian, but they're still delicious dishes. So I don't know. I think there's something to be said for innovating on your own. When you take the Italians out of Italy and you give them 100 years or 150 years to change, they're going to find different ways of doing things, just like you are right now.
I totally agree. And isn't it, there's certain products in Italy that didn't originate from there. And over the years, it's just kind of assimilated into their culture and they've made use of it. And it's kind of become Italian too.
Well, isn't pasta from China originally?
Is pasta? I'm not even sure about that one.
I heard that, and then of course the tomatoes came from Latin America. I think, is that right?
You could be right on that.
Yeah, I think that it was Columbus or one of the explorers in the New World brought tomatoes to Europe. So we can't even. I mean, Italian foods not even Italian. It's Chinese. It's Latin American. It's all these different influences.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I think that's such a cool thing, though.
I think it is too. I think that it shows how the world is interconnected and how a country can take products and make them its own. So obviously the exploration in the Americas was happening 500, 600 years ago, and that's when those products were coming over. But by now, I mean, people would associate tomato sauce and tomato dishes with Italian cuisine and not even think about the origins.
And I think as long as you do it justice and either make it your own and make it really good, then there shouldn't be an issue with it.
To make it authentically yours, a friend of mine always
Exactly.
says.
I love that. Yes. Authentically yours.
So I know that you're a mom and you've got two young twins and you're trying to manage the kids and your business at the same time. Do you have any advice or strategies that you use that have helped you to navigate that demand between what the kids want and what the business needs and that kind of trying to be an entrepreneur, trying to be a mom? What have you learned? What advice could you give others, parents that are in a similar situation?
I think, it changes every day. I think the biggest piece of advice is like just to keep going and do your best with each area because when you're stretched thin and you have multiple priorities, like everything can't be perfect. You have to prioritize. And for me right now, my kids come first. It used to be always my restaurant came first. I think the biggest thing is to build a really strong team. When I first had my kids, I think I didn't anticipate being gone as much as I was. And I didn't anticipate them consuming as much of my time, which in retrospect seems ridiculous. I don't know if you're a parent, but anyone who has kids knows like how demanding kids are and how kind of insane the first year is of being a parent. And with the restaurant, I was always the kind of person who wanted to do everything myself. So I was there all the time. I did every station, I made every pizza. And now it's just not possible. You have to realize like your priorities are shifting and you have to put people in place to be able to execute while you're not there. And I think now we have an amazing team. It took a while to get there, but I guess that would be my biggest advice is to really train your people and put trust in your people and let them do it because you're a good teacher and if you have a good product, like you can do both. It's just relinquishing a little bit of control.
What was that like then in the first year after you had given birth and you realized that you really needed to spend more time with the babies, but then there was this business and these two things were tugging on you. How did you manage in that first year? What did you do?
I mean, my husband was there a lot. He worked at the restaurant, so he kind of took over a lot of the work that I used to do. And then since as of now, he's kind of transitioned out into other things. Honestly, I just felt guilty a lot of the time because I didn't want to not be with my babies. And I felt so exhausted too, which I know is a normal feeling for any restaurant owner or parent or both. I still feel guilty. Like if I'm home, I feel guilty I'm not there. If I'm at the restaurant, I feel guilty I'm not home. I wouldn't change it. Like I don't want to give up my restaurant, and I would never not want to be a parent, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Sure.
you make it work. And the bottom line is that your kids get bigger, things go on, and you do the best you can, and you give both areas, you give your kids as much as you can, and you give your restaurant as much as you can. And hopefully it's enough.
Well, I think you had some really good advice there too, to empower other people. I mean, at some point, you just have to trust others to do what you do. And yes, they're going to make mistakes, and yes, they're going to do things wrong, and yes, you're going to get angry. But over time, they make those mistakes and then they improve.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of my biggest things is like, or it was that they weren't doing it exactly how I would do it. But you just have to acknowledge that and kind of move on. Like that pizza is not going to look exactly how I made it, but it'll still taste good. You know what I mean? It'll just be a little bit different. It'll be different, not worse.
Just because someone doesn't cut the onion the same way you cut the onion doesn't mean it's not going to taste the same or just as good, right?
Exactly. Yes. Everyone does things their own way, but as long as the final product tastes good, sometimes that has to be enough. I mean, my brother is also my business partner, so while I was gone, he was there. He does more of the business side of it, so he's not quite as involved as like being on the counter on the pizza oven. He also has 3 young children of his own, so it's been a busy couple of years, we'll say.
It sounds like it, yeah. Have you guys been able to kind of you take Saturday night and you take Friday night. Have you balanced it that way or trading off?
You think so, but Peter does a lot more of just kind of he's not in the restaurant. Like he is in there, but he's also running like our bagel shops, and he does a lot more of the actual business side of things.
Okay. So I want to ask you, you won first place in the Pizza Intelia in Naples. What was that competition and what was that like for you to win that award?
It was very exciting. I know everyone would probably say that, but it felt like a big accomplishment, not only winning that, but also just going. I think it's taken me a couple years just to kind of put myself out there after having the babies, and it felt really good just to be able to go and do something like that. The competition itself had multiple categories, and so I actually went mostly to compete in the American pizza category, and then I entered the Intelia as well, just because I don't usually like to travel and not do multiple styles. And I entered in that one, and I did basically a grandma style pizza, but I call it a patty style after my mom because I put sesame seeds on the bottom. And it's a pizza that she always made when we were little. My mom is part Italian, and I think it comes from like her roots. But she didn't have the most together upbringing, so I don't think she has like a distinct memory of exactly where the recipe came from, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, tell us about that competition because I think there will be a lot of people who are not familiar with that competition or what it means in the pizza world.
Yeah, so it was the Trofeo Cup, and the Caputos put it on. It just basically means that they sponsor it. So you don't have to use Caputo flour, but I actually did for that one. I used their Nuvola. The competition itself, people come from all over the world, quite multiple countries there. I want to say upward of 14 countries who were competing at the competition. And so the different categories, the big one is Neapolitan or STG. And people come and there's strict rules for that category, and each category has their own rules. And then after you make your pizza, you present it to a panel of judges. So for the American category, I made just a cheese pizza. For the Intelia, which is the pan style pizza, like I said, I made the patty style. There's becoming more and more pizza competitions, but the big ones are that one in Naples, Italy, and then there's another one in Salsa Maggiore, Italy. Or sorry, it used to be in Salsa Maggiore. It's now in Parma. And then there's a really big one in Las Vegas, and that's at Pizza Expo, which for those of you who don't know is like the big pizza convention of the year. And all the pizza operators, mostly in the US, but also international, come, and any type of equipment or product that you want will be there. And then there's also a bunch of different competitions. So if you want to compete, you have to sign up basically when the show opens because it's so competitive just to enter the competitions.
I would not have thought of Las Vegas as being the headquarters of a big pizza competition.
I think it's just that there's a lot of space, a lot of conventions congregate there or are put on there just because it's it's not central, but it's easy to get to for a lot of people. And there's big centers that they can be held at. But I agree. Las Vegas actually has a lot of good pizza now. More and more pizzerias are opening there that are really great.
I do like American style pizzas. My favorite's Detroit style.
I've never actually made Detroit pizza, but it is very popular.
Well, I used to think that it was Chicago deep dish style, and then I started to experience Detroit more, where I guess that's the big difference is just it's done more of a rectangle dish. Is that right?
It's rectangular. I believe that there's some butter used in like like in the crust or on the pan, and then there's also
Oh, okay.
the cheese crust or the crown that goes on it, which is delicious.
Okay, it must be the butter. Anytime you add butter to something, it just kicks it up a few notches, right?
That's so true. What's the typical style of pizza by you in
Uh,
Spain?
They in Spain they'll copy Italian styles, so you can get a margarita or well, really anything that you would find in Italy. That that's what they have here. They don't really have their own Spanish style of pizzas, and Italian food is quite popular in Spain.
Oh, it is.
You'll see
I've never been to Spain.
Spain is for many people it's a wonderful gastronomy destination. They do a lot with seafood. They do a lot with pork products. It's a very meat centric country. So
Okay.
I've talked to some people who are vegans, and they before they come, they're kind of thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to really enjoy that trip to Spain. But there is a lot of vegetarian and vegan cuisine here. You just have to look a little bit harder for it, I think. But let's go back to I want to finish talking about this pizza competition, the Pizza Intelia, and you won this competition. Do you think that had an impact or a change of your role in the global pizza community because you won that competition?
I think there's definitely, I don't know if it's a level of respect, but it's definitely these competitions are something that people do, they follow and they seek out. So it was honestly winning that category was a pretty big surprise. Like, I was actually more excited winning that than I would have been, I think, winning the American because the Intelia is 100% Italian, right? We had a panel of Italian judges. So it felt like a really big accomplishment, I will say.
Since you won that, have people been seeking you out more outside of the United States for either competitions or knowledge or speaking or writing or anything?
Not since that competition. I do get a lot of, through social media or just in the restaurant, people do call um, to ask questions and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't say it was due to that competition.
Okay. How has being in business evolved since COVID? We always hear stories about how it's so much harder now to run a restaurant and the costs have gone up and it's hard to find staffing and so on. How has it changed for you and your family? Because you come from the bagel business and then moved into the pizza making business. So how has it changed since the pandemic?
Yeah, it's honestly been a wild couple of years, I would say. We didn't know what to expect during the pandemic, and it was probably our busiest period ever. Because it was just our model. Like we were somehow set up for a pandemic. We had garage doors. No one had to come inside. We're mostly to go anyway. So I think the transition going back away from the pandemic was even harder for us.
Hmm.
Just getting used to having people come back into the restaurant, having more places reopen. And like you said, I think the cost of food is astronomical for some things these days. And I think people still in their minds are like, oh, a slice of pizza should be cheap. But if you saw the cost of our cheese, like you could understand why we're charging this much for a slice of pizza.
Yeah.
I think that is the big thing. People kind of balk at a lot of the prices, but they'll go next door and spend, $10 on a cup of coffee. So it's kind of just perspective and like what you want to spend your money on. And staffing's another really big issue. We are really fortunate to have such a great crew right now, but I think people's mindset and their drive, it went elsewhere during the pandemic. I think a lot of people in the service industry realized that they didn't want to be doing that, or they got used to not being in that environment and they shifted away from it. I think I heard some statistic that like 20 or 30% of the service industry workers like left since the pandemic. So I think it's harder to find really good people. And when you do find them, you don't want to let them go.
How have your customers changed since they started coming back?
We've got a pretty loyal customer base, or we're very based in our neighborhood. So I think now people have acclimated back. I think it's definitely taken a couple years though. I think even in where I live in Boulder, it's a very liberal place. People are very divided. Like during the pandemic, you had your people who not relied, but they truly believed in masks and, spacing out and doing this. And then you had the other percentage of people who, scoffed at you if you were wearing a mask, or like just didn't believe in the pandemic. Or, I mean, I don't know how it was in Spain, but Boulder, I think people were more on the same page as a community, but you went right outside of Boulder and people had a completely different mindset. So I think it divided everyone. And I think it's taken a while for people to trust each other and to kind of just get back to normal, whatever that looks like.
And now the new normal is so far away from what normal was in 2019. I don't even know where the world's headed right now. It's just
it's so
everything's
true.
such a mess.
It really is. Yeah, I think we just have to feel fortunate for, that we are doing well in our businesses, and people do still come even when there's so many other options, and the economy is, it's hard for some people to even survive in it.
I think we should just make a bunch of pizzas and open up a lot of bottles of wine and bring all the world leaders together in a big hotel banquet room and just let them pig out and drink all the wine and eat all the pizza and just make friends, right?
I love
And
that
maybe
idea.
maybe we'd have world peace after all that. Gastrodiplomacy at its best, with featuring slices of pizza from Audrey Janes and Joe Carlucci. We'd have to invite Joe to the party.
Of course, we'll definitely invite Joe. I love that idea. I think, if anything can broker peace, it's pizza. I was actually joking with my husband. I was like, I'm not going to go back into pizza after having twins. I'm going to go into like negotiating world peace, because the way they fight and having to like create peace between them is a whole nother level.
I love it. Well, Audrey, that's all we have time for today, but I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I know how busy you are, and just to take the time and share your knowledge and experience with our listeners, I appreciate it, and I know they do as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this episode of the Taste of Place podcast. This episode is brought to you by the World Food Travel Association and its World Food Travel Academy. We'd like to hear from you. We invite you to share your ideas, questions, and thoughts about the podcast by emailing us at help@worldfoodtravel.org, or you can connect with us and comment about the episode on major social media platforms. Special thanks to our guest Audrey Kelly, and our sincerest thanks to you for joining us. I'm Eric Wolf, wishing you a safe, happy, and productive month ahead.